You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Thor,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mom,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is William Staikos. Thanks for tuning into Author Stories. You can find all of the archives of the show at hankgarner.com. And when you're there, click on the subscribe buttons in the right-hand sidebar. There's places where you can subscribe in iTunes and Google Play and Stitcher Radio and even YouTube, hankgarner.com. I'd like to thank some sponsors that make this show possible. Grammarly. Go to getgrammarly.com/Hank to sign up for your free account. Grammarly, built by linguists and language lovers, Grammarly's writing app finds and corrects hundreds of complex writing errors, so you don't have to. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes while also catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. Go to getgrammarly.com/Hank when you're working on that new book before you send it to your final editor. Let Grammarly take a pass at it. You'd be surprised at what it'll catch, and your editor will thank you for it. Brand new from Stefan Bolt's The White Dragon Omnibus Edition. This book has been 2 years in the making for those of us that have been following along as Stefan has released the books Genesis, Crucible, and Alchemy. We have been on the edge of our seats waiting to see how he would finish the series, and now you can read it all in one volume. No waiting. Genesis, Crucible, and Alchemy, The White Dragon series by Stefan Boltz. Available now. There's links to it in the show notes. Untold Deception by William Staikos. I looked up. The executioner pulled the lever. Her body fell, and the crowd cheered. I couldn't watch the rest, so I lowered my eyes to the ground. I think I understand now. I get it, Mom. I now know what it means to grow up. Untold Deception by William Staikos is a book full of magic, coming-of-age story, and a story about family. Check out the link in the show notes, Untold Deception by William Staikos. Stay tuned after the show for an audiobook clip for Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I'm really excited to have William Staikos on the show with me today. He has a brand new book called Untold Deception, and I can't wait for you guys to get your hands on it and read it. Welcome to the show, William.
Thanks for having me, Hank.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you. We begin each show with the same question, and that question is, what is your first memory of wanting to be a writer or storyteller?
I always liked telling creative stories since I was a little kid, but I always went from one job to the next. So I always had a different dream. One moment I want to be a director. One moment I want to be a karate guy because I saw Bruce Lee. One moment I wanted to be a boxing person. I realized that my problem wasn't, I just got bored really quickly of the same story. So as I was working in a place, Takumi Stamping, I got really bored. And I started thinking of over and over again, what would make a good superhero story? One that's dark, that's not afraid to kill off characters so you know that they're mortal. And one that's not too bright and sunshiny that it's a cookie cutter ending. And I kept thinking of putting myself in the main protagonist role as a form of escapism while stamping out pieces of metal. One after another, I just kept thinking and thinking. I'm like, I should do this, I should kill off this character, I shouldn't do that, that's too dark. And as I was thinking, I'm like, this story is so good, and I'm fantasizing about this story, that I should share it with the world. So once I sat down in January of 2016, I just wrote 9 hours every day for a month straight because I knew exactly what I wanted to write.
That's awesome. Were you a big reader as a kid?
As a kid, no, I got into reading older. As a kid, I didn't have the attention span to really sit down and focus and appreciate a good book. I was more of the kid who's playing outside, liked to play video games every now and then. hockey, soccer, that kind of stuff. I couldn't have the attention span to really focus on something at that point yet. But around the teenage years, I started appreciating, of course, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, stories like William Golding, The Lord of the Flies was one of my favorite books. I liked how it was dark and cynical along the way, showing what people are. I always love that intense feeling of you don't know what's going to happen next or who's going to be killed off. And it's kind of similar to The Walking Dead. If you ever watch The Walking Dead series, you'll know that you root for a character, a Game of Thrones, but you don't know who's going to get killed off yet.
Right. Yeah, Lord of the Flies was kind of the granddaddy of all that, of just pull the rug out from under you and no holds barred.
Right, and I definitely say that that's really lost in some modern day movies or some modern day books of a cookie cutter, everyone lives happily ever after type of ending. I'm not saying you have to be dark and dreary the whole way through, but at least make it your superhero believable. Like every Marvel movie I watch now, I'm like, that person lives, that person lives, that person lives. You know what I mean? It's boring. Like I could tell you the ending before you go see it.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of those heroes are 50 years old or older. The DC comics are even older. Most of those characters are 70 to 75, close to 80, years that they've been telling stories with those same characters, and they just live on and on and on and on. And on one hand, it's a tried and true character, that Superman and Batman are always going to be there. But you always know that they're not really going to go anywhere. They're going to be there. So there's only so much tension you can drum up from those types of characters.
Yes, I agree with long-term series for those. You could definitely tell that. But at least Batman has a mortality to him. You can get shot. He can get hurt. You can see it. Superman kind of just feels like he'll pull a superpower out of nowhere and just be like, yeah, lazy writing. I can go back in time. I can go around the world, reverse time. That's not how it works, but
Yeah.
It just.
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know.
I get it. So was The Hunger Games like the first series that you really got into that really kind of broke your imagination?
Yes, I'd say Hunger Games was one of the first ones. I definitely liked the aspect of the wealth gap, showing that it puts things into perspective of how much, like a squirrel, like you cook a little, she would always cook a squirrel or something to eat, and it would just show that Katniss has to struggle throughout life in one moment, and the next moment these people are drinking blue water so that they could puke it back up just so they could eat more. That's the type of wealth and greed they had, is that they'll literally force themselves to throw up so they can just eat and consume more. And I really like them showing people in that kind of cynical light. So I wanted to do something similar to that in my own novel. Now, I do believe my novel personally is original, like it's out there. And I know it's kind of with a grain of salt because it's coming from me, the author, myself. So you can always say that, but there's similarities that you could drive. But I do believe that my characters are like a nutshell Wizard of Oz episode where I'm pointing to people in real life going, oh, and you were there. Oh, and you were there. Oh, and you were there. Because as a writer, you take characters in your own life and you put it into your book. So it's like a weird Wizard of Oz feeling of pointing to people, knowing that, oh, yeah, I made my dad into the mom character in this because she acts this way. I made one of my best friends this teacher. I made the cat that can talk in this from my own house cat, and I used to joke around pretending that my house cat was insulting guests. Like my cat would meow, and I'd be like, "Oh, you can't say that to him. Well, what do you think you're doing, Snowball?" Like I joke like that. You know what I mean?
So the imagination has always been there. Just because you didn't start writing until a couple of years ago, or turn into a big reader until your teenage years. It sounds like that storytelling gene, that desire to tell stories has always been there.
Yeah, I've always liked the how you can capture everyone's attention when you tell a story, like a good, funny story, or just a serious story in general. Like everyone listens in. I noticed that if you just slow down and start having some true aspects that anyone can relate to, it's just interesting to see everyone can slow down and tune in, because everyone in this fast-paced world is trying to post a new Facebook, make a new Facebook post, text a friend, but it's just nice to see people can sit down and just have a conversation. And I know I kind of sound like really old for my age, but on the bus, I was that guy trying to talk to people on their phones, trying to go, well, we have a conversation. Get off your phone. People used to talk to each other. And I was like 20, and I felt like I was an old man.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Were you ever a big fan of like traditional fantasy? Lord of the Rings, that sort of fantasy?
I like Lord of the Rings, but I gotta be honest with you, I have not read the book Lord of the Rings. I know a lot of people are gonna be like, how could you not be into fantasy? It's just that I watched the movie, and to me, based on the movie, is that they kind of pulled spells out of nowhere that made me unnerved by it. I'm like, do they do that in the book? Because that doesn't make me want to read it. But to be honest, I should read the book. Like I'm into fantasy. There's no excuse. But it just seems like they just pull spells out of nowhere. You know what I mean? Like Harry Potter fantasy, they prepared you. They said, this is Expecto Patronus at the start. This is what it does. And it gave you a build-up. When I watched Lord of the Rings, it was just like they pulled a random spell. I'm like, well, where did that come from? Like, oh. That just seemed like a plot-solving spell you just casted there. Like, I never got it. So I'm probably pissing off a bunch of people. I'm not even lying. I'm probably making so many people just screaming at their computer.
well, we all have different issues with genre fiction, and fantasy has tropes that have been used and misused. But yeah, you definitely should go read it. I think you need to give it a chance.
I think so, to be fair. But I was definitely I was a huge fan of Harry Potter. Definitely, I went back and I read those even after the movies, which is really weird, I know. But when I was really young, I didn't read very much, and I went back to it after watching the movies. I gave it a chance, and it was still really good. Even after watching the movie, like I knew the ending, it was still really well written. And I noticed that the comparison between the two is that they made Ron really different in the movies. They made Ron more of a wimp in the movies, and then I read the book, and he was actually the tough guy of the group. So that really threw me off. All he was afraid of was spiders, but he picked fights. So I'm like, they really messed up on the movies in that part. So I actually like the book a lot more than the movies.
Yeah, what you learn really quickly is that movies and books are a lot of times vastly different. And when you try to in case of Harry Potter, you're talking about books that are 300 to 400 pages all the way up to 800 pages or so, and then you've got to condense that down to 2 hours. Yeah, good luck with that. There's going to be a lot of stuff left on the chopping room floor for sure.
Oh yeah, and one of the biggest things that's going on right now in my generation, and one thing I definitely want to touch up on, and I prepared for, is the I'm anti-PC, not in the sense that I don't get what they're trying to do. They're trying to have the intention of being good, but what comes across is it just comes across disingenuine, and they try to shut people up for different opinions. And in my novel, I wanted to show that your enemy, the person who doesn't like you, who his intent is just to hurt you, is going to say the same jokes if they know you're a strong-willed person as your friend or your family members. They're going to say the same jokes, but the intent is what's very important, is going to be different. And they don't make fun of you because they hate you. They're making fun of you because they love you. And they will go through a wall for you. And I wanted to make sure in my novel that I would use the same insults by the bullies at school at the start, of people who try to bully him, as the protagonist Salan. He's a half cat person, right? So I say things like pussy or yarn chaser, or go drink some milk, or the worst things. And then he goes and hangs out with his homeless friends because he doesn't have too many friends because he's mixed race. And I want to relate that to the mulatto culture, which actually is very insulting. It stands for a mule. And it's what they refer to half black, half white kids growing up in the 60s. And they couldn't make friends with black kids or white kids because they were so different. So something that should make people come closer together made them farther apart for a brief moment because it was so exotic and out there that they couldn't have any friends. So I want to make sure that the homeless people that he hung out with, or like they'd make fun of him, so calling him a pussy, calling him a cat, and he'd always make fun of him, calling him drunks and no lives, but they're still close friends at the end of the day.
So, how old are you, William?
I am 21.
Okay, all right. So, yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, and not me, the guy in his mid-40s, because I'm going to sound like the old guy in the conversation here. But there's a lot of talk about the way writing and literature in general are changing, because some people believe that you have to tiptoe around everything because, and I'm not saying this is my opinion, I'm playing devil's advocate here, that you have to tiptoe around everything because young people can't handle it. But what you're saying is the exact opposite. You're saying that people in your generation don't want to be treated that way. Is that what I'm hearing?
Here's the problem. I think that there are enough people who will go a polar opposite because of there's so many PC. There is a political correctness culture of my generation, but to balance it out, you also have to, because all the YouTube videos are making fun of like PC people, to balance it out, there's equal amount of people rebelling against it because they hate it so much. There's an inner rebellion towards PC culture. So you have these major arguments between these people, and people are just getting offended by it. But the problem is that people aren't embracing, they're not embracing intent. All they're embracing is, you said this, so you must mean this. That means you're a horrible person. Like, if someone recorded every little joke that I made, like, you would run out of podiums to put in front of me as a white male. Like, you would just... But some of my closest friends who are African American, we make the most out there jokes on the factory floor. Like, if I repeated it, I don't know if some people could actually listen to it without getting upset. But we still love each other at the end of the day. That's what people have to realize. We don't make fun of each other because we hate each other, but we love each other. And that was the biggest thing I wanted to make in my book clear. And I also did some other things too, like he's homeless, right? He hangs out with homeless people, and he's 16, so I made him drink with homeless people too, underage. Now, some people would be like, oh, you can't do that, but it adds realism. Like, you live that kind of lifestyle, you're going to get into some shit when you're younger, and you're poor especially too.
So do you feel like that economics divide people more than what we traditionally think of as maybe racial lines or lines of ethnicity or country of origin? Do you think economics play a bigger role than that?
I think economics play a role in it only because of previous actual past discrimination that did go down, known as red zoning. So white real estate agents would only sell certain places to minorities, mostly African Americans and other people who are immigrants, into certain red zone areas. So those red zone areas actually didn't have a higher property value, but white zone areas did. So when you say economic balance, that kind of go hand in hand with rich being generally more white people and poor being generally those people. Now, they can, of course, rise up if they have the talent and have the drive to be a better person. I'm not saying they don't, but they've certainly been shot at the foot at the very start of their lives. Now, I understand. Now, that's no excuse for staying poor and pointing the finger and blaming people. So you don't play victim, but this is a reality that's happened over time. It's better now, but throughout time, it's been very bad.
Where did you grow up, William?
I grew up in London, Ontario, Canada. It's an upper middle class house. So I have not known really racial discrimination or such things, but I understand what it's like because I've talked to these people who've worked minimum wage factory jobs and their own experiences in third world countries and some places like Jamaica. It's not exactly a third world country, but it has a lot of issues. And Trinidad, where there's a lot of shootings. So I've talked to these type of people, and I've learned from their own stories how to apply it to my novel.
Now, what's really interesting is Canada might have some of the best marketing in the world because those of us in the United States, we constantly hear about how wonderful Canada is and how Canada is the most liberal and accepting country
please.
in North America, and you guys have great marketing. But then I talk to people like you, and I hear that there are actual real problems in Canada, and there's still inequities, and people are still acting like people and having to, kind of figure out how this thing works. So what you're saying is that you guys are not a lot different from us after all.
No, we're not that much different. If a war breaks out, we're kind of like the little brother relying on you to go in first. That's 100% true. We try to be friends with everybody, and we're polite, but that doesn't mean we still don't fight, and there's still not disagreements up here. The people are similar, but there's always some cultural differences. But just to go out and say, like, oh, this is Canada, this is America, there's both so diverse countries that the problems are very similar going on. And I do believe that although your politics are much more exciting than ours, because at least our politics are a little bit more together than what's going on in America right now. But for the most part, the people are pretty similar. If you like being cold, come up north. That's all I really got to tell you. It's not that much different.
That's awesome. So with these ideas in mind, you start writing your book because you want to highlight that, among other things. I'm not saying that your book is just about kind of getting on your soapbox. I'm not saying that, but these things definitely factored into your mind when you were writing that you did want to show that people can get along, and that just because we're different doesn't
Hank, you
mean.
Still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Are you there?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I went on a whole tangent there and we lost. Okay, I'll edit that out.
Sorry, I didn't hear you first. I talked for a while, and then I just waited for like a solid 45 seconds. I'm like, Hank, coughing?
I heard you and I was answering. So I'll just pick up from there. So I was saying that not to say that your book is just all about you getting on a soapbox and talking about the things that are bothering you. I'm not saying that, but it does sound like that these things were in your mind when you were writing, and that you wanted to tell a story that could show that people could get along, and that people, even though on the surface they seem to be very different, and maybe they even kind of make fun of their differences, it's really in an expression of love and acceptance to kind of poke fun at what makes us different.
Yes, absolutely. That's what people need to realize, is that they've taken a step back in, I still sound like an old man, I know I do, but they've taken a step back over time because people are so full of fear of losing their job, of saying one wrong thing, of that someone just trying to have a good time can have the intent of just trying to joke around, and then it comes across as, oh, you said this, that means you're this person, and they've already labeled you, and that's it, it's over. Like, your job it's gone. And that's why I'm really anti-PC. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want this to come across like I just hate on people. I don't hate on people. I just want people to be comfortable with each other enough to openly joke around about it. Now, I'm obviously not saying if you have a Mexican friend and you just start making Mexican jokes to some random stranger across the street, because then you're probably going to get punched and you kind of deserve it.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, make sure the person's comfortable and they know that your intent is good. And that's the type of friendships you want, because the people who are harder on you in life are the type of people that are going to make you grow and be more constructive and a better person, who just don't hold back. The people who hold back are the type of people that will stab you in the back because they're being all nice to you, and then as soon as you turn your back, they'll be like, oh, did you see that guy William? Oh my God, he's gained some weight or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Right. I'd rather have a buddy just tell you, bro, you're getting fat, like lose weight, and then I'd be like, oh shit, am I? Okay, thanks. You know what I mean? You can make the readjustment. You can make the readjustment, and that's I'm going on a little bit of a rant because it does piss me off.
Well, the important thing to remember in all that is that you can only do that if you have a relationship with someone. You can't just pick a random stranger off the street and start talking crap. That's gonna, that's just, it's not gonna end well.
You're just asking to get knocked out at that point. You're like, you know what?
Exactly. I have friends like that. We call each other horrible, horrible things, and then, we hug it out. And because, that's just what you do. That's what friends do, especially men. So So the book gave you a great way to talk about that and to couch it in a story. So where did the idea for the book come from? What came first to you?
The idea of the book really came from a bunch of different aspects of my own life, putting it at one to big character. So like I said, when I was at Takumi, I was thinking of a story, escapism. I was putting myself in the hero's shoes. And at third, I thought, I was like, Jesus Christ, I'm imagining myself as a hero. I'm like, what am I, like 10 years old? And then I'm like, wait a sec, this is actually really good. I could make money off this. Like, I think I got something here. And it eventually turned into, what am I 10 years old to, I want to be a writer, and I think I know what I have to do in my life to do it. And I had all these characters and people in my own life that I knew for a fact, oh, this could be really interesting. I know that I was always a weird kind of person, so I'm like, that'll make an interesting protagonist. And I'm writing about myself, so I can show my perspective of the world the best than someone else. And I can add on, like this cat I have, it's called Sinoj, right? It's like a Black Panther type creature. And he meets it when he's at a low point. And I like to show that, like, my cat Snowball, like, I know I own a cat, but she would, like, meow and stuff. I'd be like, oh, I wouldn't say that about that guest. Or, like, I pretend the cat's talking shit to someone I know whenever she'd make a noise, right? I joke around about it. But in the book, I made it so he could actually talk to the cat, but you don't see the subtitles. All you see is, like, meow. So it's like that Han Solo Chewbacca feeling where Chewbacca says something and you only know what he said based on Han's reaction. You know what I mean?
Right. Which is awesome. By the way, it's fun to have that interaction where the reader's like, what? And then you, it makes you pay attention to the context to understand everything that's going on.
Right, you can understand what the cat's thinking as like an aftermath, and once it hits you, it makes you laugh. Like, it's like, oh, that's what the cat's saying. That's funny. Like one scene from Star Wars I'd steal from is like Chewbacca and Han's on a cold planet, and Chewbacca goes grrr, like makes that noise, and Han goes, oh, you think you're cold, right? And then you can connect like afterwards. See, it's funny. Like, you could connect it afterwards, and you go, oh. So I'm like, once I saw that, I'm like, that's that. I am going to steal that idea because that is a good idea. But for the most part, I try to diversify my characters.
Yeah. Oh man. So you start thinking of the story and you're like, I could do that. Had you had any experience with writing before that? Were you studying writing at all? Were you reading blogs, anything like that?
I was always keeping up to date with reading, but in terms of writing itself, I was never going into university or college for writing. I was simply just thinking of ideas of what I could write. I always got good marks in high school, at least university English, but I just decided, you know what, this is what I want to do. I finally figured out what I want to do with my life, and that's one of the hardest things to figure out when you hit 17 or 18, because life stops being I'm gonna live off my parents. It starts being, how am I gonna make money? How am I gonna move out? What am I gonna do for the rest of my life? Like, these are all big decisions, and I think a lot of people who are in my shoes just don't know, what am I gonna do? I become bored so fast of things, and I figured out that I really want to get into writing. That is my dream. So I'm hoping to become a traditionally published author at one point in my life.
So you since you mentioned that you self-published this book, were you aware of kind of Kindle publishing and the state of the ability that you can get your work out there even if you're not traditionally published?
I started off, I didn't know about self-publishing. Like, I looked it up, but they all recommended trying to get traditionally published. Now, sure. The articles that I read, though, they're like, oh, this is what this is like. I didn't realize that it's kind of like Dragon's Den. Think about selling a book like you're a company on Dragon's Den. So if you walk into Dragon's Den and you go, hi, I'd like to get an agent. I have 0 sales. I've had really I don't have any connections, and I have this great idea. You could be inventing like fire, and they'd still be like, yeah, I'm not investing in your company. It doesn't matter how you won't have any sales to back it up. You have no connections. Like, why did you even bother walking into the office? So I started making sure that I had some experience under my belt. So then when I ask an agent, I can go, this is how many sales I have. This is who I've talked to. Then they'll start looking at you and giving you deals. You know what I mean?
Right, right. So you said that you wrote 9 hours a day for a month to get the book out. Were you? Did you have the whole structure of the book before you started writing? Like when you sat down, did it just start flowing out? Like how much preparation?
As soon as I sat down, I wrote out all the races, every stereotype they had, and how I was going to break them with an individual. So I wanted to make, I had some like creatures like called Minyades, the half bat, the bat people, and I wanted them to be like folklore for like Christian devils. Like so the people, the regular humans saw them because they went to war with them. They discriminated against them for war purposes, and that discrimination still lives. So they call them devils, bloodsuckers, but like people from hell, basically. So I want to say that they built their Christian religion for humans behind their species to make fun of them so that they can kill them easier. And I made another race called the Cultrons. They're the heaven, like the angels, and they helped them out a lot in the war. So they, of course, make them out to be these really kind and good people. But the way I wrote about it, I made the angels arrogant, full of themselves, and I made them like horrible people, and I made the bad people good and genuine, and they show like the differences between the cultures overall.
So by kind of turning things on its head like that, do you think that allowed you to tell a more engaging story, a more exciting story, because you're kind of turning the tropes on its head, so to speak? Yeah,
I do like breaking stereotypes in that kind of fashion. I also like them. I made sure they all make fun of each other for the stereotypes while they still love each other too, as I said before. And the Felis is the main protagonist, Salan. He's half cat, half human. And the reason why I made him that is because he's really poor. And all the Felis, there's very few of them left, and they're like alley cats. I was thinking like poverty. They live in alleyways. It's a perfect animal for them to be. And since the natural and their culture is similar to First Native, I wanted the religion to actually be not the First Native culture as I would choose normally. I wanted it to be more peaceful, like Buddhism. So I actually related things to the Dharma and his mother's teachings of what you should apply to your own life. And I've actually read some things from Buddhism, and I agree with the religion. It's one of the few peaceful religions out there if you read the scripture.
Right. So as you're spending this month writing, you began by writing out the races and the cultures and then deciding how you were going to address stereotypes and ultimately break them. What about the story and the plot? How did that come to you?
Let's see. The story and the plot, I wanted it to be a revolution. I wanted it to be someone overtaking a country, and I think that a poor country where people are practically slaves and getting paid $1 for a day's work, I wanted to relate that to what's going on in China right now and making your Nike shoes or anything like that. And I also wanted to show what it's like to be on the inside of that. And I had a monarchy, though. I had kings and queens, and I wanted to show overthrowing the monarchy throughout the storyline. And he comes back to his stomping grounds to stop World War II, an overall World War II of the whole storyline. And I was a bit nervous writing it, but as I kept writing, it just started flowing out continuously. Like I thought about it so much for those 4 months that when I finally sat down, I just wrote a chapter a day.
Wow. So, when did you know you were finished with the book? You had never written one before. Did you tie up all the storylines? Did you have an ultimate character progression in mind? What was your idea for the ending, and how did you know that you nailed it?
The overall ending, I wanted to be that he grows with the storyline. I wanted him to start off to be a little bit innocent. Yeah, he gets in some school fights, he sticks up for himself, regular kid stuff. And then I wanted people to start dying around him, showing how was he going to deal with this and becoming a running away from his own country, being on the road, being hunted. And with his special powers of being an abundant, he's able to control smoke-like powers externally. but he's still mortal. He can still be cut. He can still be hurt. And so I had this character with one of his arms partially chopped off running around as a runaway. And I just thought, I need to make this character really, really go through some bad things so that when he comes out, he can still make dark humor jokes and still be the same person he is and not trying to make him into a monster, because that's what his mother warned him about. This power can make you corrupt and into a monster in the end. And I wanted to give that hope where you think he's about to go off, but he doesn't. He still stays who he is and learns not to trust people for their face value because of the things he's been through. And at the very end, I had him go through being like trying to scavenge and hunt to survive, and I had these women eating like apples, and they're saying like they're so broke because they can only afford 6 apples instead of 8, and he just shakes his head because it makes him almost want to puke. Like, you have no idea how lucky you are that you can just afford food. I wanted to show that first world problem from the perspective of someone who's been through all that at the very end. So that's how I felt I nailed it, in that I wanted to show, like, that's what you sound like to me when you talk that way. You sound very, very, very full of yourself, and you sound like you don't know the world for what it really is. I had that personally happen to me when I walked outside a college campus, and right in front of a guy, I swear to God, picking stuff out of the trash. Like, this guy was like had holes in his like fingerless gloves, like typical homeless guy. You couldn't paint him even more. And he's like eating like this disgusting trash, and there's like stuff getting on his beard. And as I'm walking out, all 5 of these people who I knew we were friends with in college were like, "Oh my God, I'm so broke. Oh my God." As we go to like the closest Starbucks, I'm like, I hate all you fucking people. Like, it's all I was thinking about the entire way. Like, how could you even think at that level as you pass by someone eating like a moldy sandwich out of the garbage?
Right. Oh man. When you no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. No. You go ahead.
Yeah. Did you leave room at the end of this book for more stories with these characters and in this world?
Yes, I did. I left it so that one of the main antagonists, Dr. Mangel, and that was based on the German scientist known as the Angel of Death at Auschwitz, and he used to perform experiments on people. And I made sure that he got away. He got his revenge against the people responsible for the most part, but I made sure he got away to be an antagonist in the future in the second book if I decide to write one. Now, I'm probably going to write a second book because I love writing the first one so much. Like, it was so much fun for me. But I left that antagonist get away on purpose, just so that if I ever want to write one, it's still there. And I made him come back go to a new country, starting a new life. And right before he opens the door to a guild for like abundance like himself, who can go and take, as a free agent, go take missions and get gold for them. At the very end, he opens up the door, and that's how it ends. I just wanted that ending of, like, everything's okay with him. There's still some worry about the doctor, but for the most part, everything gets tied up nicely.
Right. William, what do you hope people take away from this book? Do you hope that they just have an entertaining experience and, that they have, a couple of nights reading and that they've had an engaging story? Do you hope that they learn a little something about the world around them while they're doing it? What's your hope that people take away from your book?
I hope that people understand the main point, going back to that I said before, is the anti-PC argument I made. I hope that people really understand what I'm trying to do with stereotypes and how people need to approach it in their own lives, of being willing to joke around about that stuff and understanding there's a difference between what you say and intent. And intent is the most important factor of what's going on in today's society. And I feel like intent has taken a back seat. And just because one politician said one thing 10 years ago, all of a sudden he's labeled as he's automatically labeled. And all these people have to come out and apologize for stuff they shouldn't even be apologizing for. Like, the people accusing them have probably said worse stuff, but there's so much fear going around that when there's a finger to point at someone and someone has to get the career done with, they let it happen. They just point to him and say, yep, that's the bad guy. Let him go. And I hope that people really understand my opinion about stereotypes, and I hope people really understand how I feel about the military and what they do to some people, how they take advantage of some people and tell them to go fight and kill somebody they have no problems with originally. And I don't want people to be just a pawn in the grand scheme of things. I know that sounds like a hippie thing to say, but really think about who you're shooting and who you're picking a fight with and why your government has picked a fight with them. Because I guarantee there's no weapons of mass destruction. It might just be the oil beneath their feet.
Yeah.
So I think they should really think about that before you pick a fight. Now, obviously, that's a done with, easy thing to make fun of now that it's done and over with. But you get my point. You can it doesn't come across too well when you don't question things of why a government's invading a place in the first place.
Right. Well, one thing that this book will surely do, William, is make you think. And isn't that what we want people to do when they read our work? We want them to think about things, to think about the world around them, how we treat each other, to be entertained, obviously. I think we all want that. But if we can make someone think about the decisions we make, about the world around us, then we've done our job. And, people can draw their own conclusions in the end, but at least we made them think about it.
I believe that the main thing I want people to see is see the world through, the main thing an author wants to see is, like, understand the world through my own eyes. Like, see the way I see things and get what I'm trying to say here is definitely the main point. And I do agree with you that I obviously want my readers to really think about what I'm trying to say here and not always take things at face value. Obviously, there's lighter, brighter parts of the book. And I wanted to balance it like yin and yang. I wanted to have it bittersweet. I wanted to have dark, dark moments where you go, oh my God, and it throws you off. And then I wanted to balance it out with a nice moment, a moment where you have some comfort so you don't know what's going to happen next. Because if you have it all dark, you're not giving any hope to your reader. You're already destroying the pursuit of reading the book in the first place. And if you have it all light, there's no threat to your protagonist. There's nothing that's going to stop your protagonist from achieving its goal. There's no hardships. Who wants to read a book with no hardships or struggles in the first place?
Right, exactly. The book is called Untold Deception by William Staikos. William, if people are just discovering you, do you have a place online where they can connect with you?
Yes, you can add me on Facebook, and also you can add me on Goodreads too. I just made a profile account on Goodreads. One last thing I'd like to say is, for now, for every purchase of the book, $1 goes to Friends of the Orphans Canada. And at the ending of the novel, I made that a goal of Salan, is to actually build an orphanage for his girlfriend. And I didn't want to release too much of the book because I kind of want to discover it for themselves. But I will, after these donations, I've also sent a pursuit for a logo for both of these companies of Friends of the Orphans Canada and Salvation Army. So depending on who gives me logo permission, I'll add that to my novel, and that will be the main person I donate to. But for now, every purchase, $1 goes to Friends of the Orphans Canada.
Excellent. William, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Hank.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
I was 10 years old when I saw my first ghost. The year was 1770. My father was a barber. He kept a small shop at the Kuenhoven Inn, where the King's Road met the Old Loop. Our modest home lay to the north, between the inn and the hanging tree. A simple box of pine boards whitewashed with crushed oyster shell, one room with a spinning wheel for mother, a chair for father, and up a ladder of branches, a garret where my parents slept. I slept on the floor below, alongside my little brother, Hans, 5 years younger than I. Our floor sloped toward the Hudson, so that when Hans rolled over in his sleep, he often went on rolling and couldn't stop, collecting splinters and grievances. Yet on this particular night, he slept peacefully, and I was the fitful one. A mouse had taken shelter in our wall, fleeing the October chill. It scritched and scratched, nibbling a nest for itself. The sound thrilled me. I possessed a vivid mind, full of toadstools and bullfrogs and lightning storms, and so imagined a skeleton writhed in the wood. The bones of Anne Underhill, perhaps, murdered by Indians at Spook Rock. I'd heard that tale from my father, who reveled in the Dutch superstitions. He would gather us to Fireside on winter nights and spin tales of the Heer of Dunder, that storm king who rattled our white windows, of the Lady of Raven Rock who died in Snowfall, pining for her lover, of trolls beneath the penny bridge and hobgoblins in the hanging tree. He'd filled my head with such dark romance that I lay waiting for Anne's little finger bones to drag me off to some bloody fate. I rather hoped she would. A cloud cleared the moon, and a square of light fell on my mother's spinning wheel. The sharp spindle glinted, and the wheel began to turn, without touch. A figure appeared before me, as through a mist. A grey head bent to the work. She fixed me with eyes black as open graves and whispered in a low, guttural hiss, "Spin, or you shall not eat." I cried out and fell to my pallet, arms over my head. Hans awoke, lost his balance, and rolled away, bleating with pain as he struck the Riverside wall. Father emerged above.
"Agatha, what is wrong?"
"There's a ghost, Papa! A ghost! Help me!" Hans laughed despite his bruises, and Mother moaned and ordered us to sleep. But Papa descended and took my hands, his blue eyes twinkling. "What did you see?" "An old woman. She said, 'Spin, or you shall not eat.'"
"Oh!"
He raised a candle beneath his chin.
"You saw old Willow. She lived here long ago, when this was the home of Isaac Hart, our candlemaker. Her husband was killed by savages. Hart took her in at the request of Lord Phillips, who paid a token sum for her upkeep. But Hart was greedy, and kept the money for himself. He never fed her unless she spun. So Willow spun and spun and spun, like a spider, year by year, growing old and blind and falling to waste. She died at that spinning wheel, fell over one day, and the spindle pierced her heart." Hans screamed and hid beneath the table. Mother appeared above. "Daniel Van Ripper, you are a fool!" I kissed Papa's fingers, for I loathed that spinning wheel. I'd be no toothless ghost spinning and haunting little girls. I felt pity for such a spirit and gratitude to have her example before me, steeling my resolve. Every night thereafter, I would leave a crust of bread for old Willow and sleep with one eye open in case she came to spin for me again.